Welcome back. Now that we have the basic LV stuff, it is time to start working towards aluminium. And this is a long process, so we should start from making some more advanced machines for our workshop. The first one is a pyrolyze oven which will produce coal tar and coal gas. And we are going to need the both of them. The first one we shall use is the coal gas, which we centrifuge with some water to obtain synthesis gas. We bring that with some air to our second and so far biggest machine, a sintering oven. But, before we can turn it on, we need to mix the coal tar with some coal coke to obtain some pitch binder, which we then extrude into raw electrodes, which we can refine in our sintering machine. For some reason, the solid inputs have to be inserted from the back. Probably the reason is to let you admire how long and big it is. It also becomes red when you use it a lot. Anyways, that's how you obtain graphite rods, which make really good electrodes. Before starting to work on aluminium, we can use these electrodes for an arc furnace, which will allow us to do many things such as annealed copper. This refined version of copper can double the outputs of electrical component recipes. Anyways, it's now time to work on aluminium. We start by mining the raw materials, bauxite and some fluorite, which we process into dusts. Then, we make a new room, with a diode for controlling the power flow. We are going to limit this area to 4 amps of LV power, so that we can safely use 2x superconductor wires. Then, we quickly fill the room with all the machines required for making aluminium out of bauxite. All we have to do now is collect the product of our new line and complete the quest for the start of the MV chapter. And thus we are in MV. Did you really think I was not going into the details of how this setup works? This is Supersymmetry, a pack all about chemistry, not about weapons and fighting. Let's get into it. The first thing we are going to need is some hydrogen fluoride, made by melting fluorite in sulfuric acid. We are going to bubble react it with water to make hydrofluoric acid. Next, using nickel and graphite electrodes in our new electrolytic cell, we break down some salt water, thus making sodium hydroxide in a water solution, which we distill in dust form. Then, we can mix that dust with water to have back our sodium hydroxide in water solution, since we did not need the dusts. Getting back on the track, we can finally use that to roast some bauxite into sodium aluminate solution, which we purify in a centrifuge. We bring that into a crystallizer and add some water and some carbon dioxide, thus obtaining aluminium hydroxide. To get rid of the trapped ions we can heat it up in a blast furnace, thus obtaining some alumina. We roast some of it in hydrofluoric acid to obtain some aluminium trifluoride. Now we only need some cryolite as a catalyst. To do so, we prepare some sodium fluoride solution, and distill the water out of it, which we roast with the aluminium trifluoride to obtain the cryolite in dust form. Now that we have all the required chemical compounds, we can melt down the catalyst and bring everything to our electrolytic cell. And that's how we obtained our first aluminium. And then we realized the setup that does all of that in an automatic chain. Here we also have a pipe that will get the steam byproduct to the steam turbines and one that brings fresh water. All we have to input is bauxite and carbon. And it looks like we are running low on bauxite. Since we are still manual mining, I think it's a good time to get a mining drill. But a good one requires a good battery. And a good battery requires chemistry. We start by making some wood vinegar inside a pyrolyze oven. Next, we distill it into methanol. Using a trickle bed reactor, we prepare some phosgene using chlorine and carbon monoxide, which we merge with the methanol in a continuous stir tank reactor to make dimethyl carbonate. And that was the fluid part of the battery. To get the dust part, we just have to throw some sodium, some iron and some manganese in a blast furnace. Now that we have all the parts, we can assemble the MV batteries. We are making 3 of them. The first one is for the power tool that will drive our drill. This drill is incredibly powerful and can break 27 blocks at once. The second battery shall be used to buffer LV power for an MV extruder, that way we can make it run on MV while being fed LV. With this machine, we can make parts in way cheaper ways. And the third battery is for running our MV electromagnetic separator that gets good stuff out of waste products of our aluminium line. Now that we have aluminium, there is one other chemistry chain we can work on in LV, oil. We start by assembling a fluid drilling rig. Now that we have our rig, we must go find a suitable place for it. Oil is most likely to be found in oceans, so we have quite a distance to do. For the moment, we are going to walk and swim. And there we are. We shall test out what kind of oil is in this place by powering our drill with batteries. And it turns out that, in this place, there is a deposit of seawater. So we try to move the drill closer to the oil fields, but it looks that there is seawater even below the ocean. The next step is to try to drill in other locations. We should probably try to do this kind of stuff far away from the poor coral reef, so we shall try digging in the opposite direction. Once we have moved a few chunks away, we can see that we are still getting in the same saltwater deposit. So, we get to more than 8 chunks far from the first spot, which will guarantee a different field, and we finally have found a heavy oiled deposit. And we fill a drum with it. Now, before we get back to the base, we must ensure that rain won't blow up our rig, so we make a flying ceiling above it. Once we get back, we can start refining it. The first step is to mix the oil with some water. Then, we take the diluted oil and we get the brine out of it using an electromagnetic separator. And it's not working because we did not need an electromagnetic separator but an electrostatic separator. You can tell the difference because one is orange and the other is blue. Anyways, we get the diluted oil into the correct machine so that we can get some desalted oil. The next step is distilling it. If we had a distillation or fractionating tower we could get all the products, but these cost stainless steel, which we don't have. So we have to use a small distillery and select which one of the products we want to extract. We are using the program 2, which will give the sulfuric fuel oil. Using an alumina catalyst and some hydrogen, we remove the sulfuric parts. And we finish the cleaning with a distillery. This substance has many usages, but, for the moment, we are going to put it into a distillery and take out the butane. Ethane would have been slightly better, but I already went with butane. Once we acquire the butane with a small distillery, we steam craft it in a roaster. Of the various outputs we could get from the next distillation, we take out the ethylene. And, after all of that lossy refining, this is how much we managed to produce. Do you know what we can do with that much ethylene? Yeah, we can void it because it's useless. Now that we have an idea on what to do, we make a line of machines dedicated to making a decent amount of ethylene. And here you can see that we are starting to get a few more drops than before. Now that we have some ethylene, we can move it into a polymerization tank where we can finally make something useful, polyethylene. However, we need 2,000 liters for each dust, which is about 10 drums of oil. So we shall look into something to help us with the fluid transfer. But, before we do that, we should procure ourselves with better building materials, such as concrete. So, let's start by making some cement. The first step is to pulverize some limestone. And we place that with some clay dust into our sintering machine to obtain hot cement clinker, which we shall cool down by shaking it with air. Then, we pulverize it into cement dust, which we mix with water and stone dust to obtain liquid concrete, which we finally solidify into handy blocks which we can keep in our pockets. We can use that for building many cool structures, but we should probably use it for making a multi-block void miner first. But I think that's something we will see in the next episode. Bye bye.